Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. We're here to review the sixth Grand Prix of the year, the Monaco Grand Prix. I'm your host, Jesse Billington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Thiemo Albers Daly. How are you?
Just about recovered, I think. It was a busy old weekend for motorsports. Not just the F1, the F2, and the F3, which frustrated and delighted in maybe just about equal measure, but grateful to have my own schedule so I could keep track of the IndyCar because while that was a long race and a late race, it was thankfully one worth staying up for.
Yeah, I haven't been back to see the highlights of that one yet, so no spoilers,
I
please.
shan't spoil it, but you'll enjoy. Watch the extended version.
Yeah, I do enjoy that Indy put together an extended highlights package and always well worth enjoying. But yeah, no, a busy weekend for motorsport, especially with a lot of racing to try and cram into a very small motor circuit, which always goes badly when it's Formula One. And this year was
Get
different.
into that.
So, yeah, we'll get into that. We'll clip through two bits of important news. The first is that Audi were running a splash of new colour this weekend to honour Tazio Nuvolari. Audi replaced the red on the rear of the car with yellow for the weekend in a special livery, and it actually looked, yeah, I'll agree with you, pretty good.
Mm,
Um, it
less
was
is
bold,
more.
yeah, bold, bright, enjoyable. Can't go wrong. They also showcased the prototype for the Audi R8 replacement as well. I can't remember if they've named it as such, but
I
it's
think it's similar to the New Volare. It's all tied together. I think it
yeah.
was all part of the same package. So I'm not sure if it's called the New Volare or if it's something similar, but it's all in the same wheelhouse.
Because Auto Union, essentially what would later become Audi, did used to run
Yeah.
in Grand Prix racing, certainly in its formative years, not necessarily when it was Formula One, but certainly in the early days of Grand Prix racing, there was a presence with Auto Union, which later became Audi. And the other important news, which I think we'll touch on as we go through the analysis as well, but it's worth bearing in mind, the speeding in the pit lane issue, which caught out Russell Hamilton,
Almost everyone's.
Piastri. No, not Piastri. Did it catch Piastri? I don't think it caught Piastri. It caught Gasly. It caught
Gasly,
Colapinto.
Pinto, I think Ocon caught at one point.
Yeah.
It's quicker for a listed row that didn't catch, which I think Max is possibly the only one that definitely didn't. Um, the reason I put it there is just because either I'm missing something fundamental, or again, a little bit like the Audi delivery, less is more. I don't see why this isn't something that can be implemented because the whole idea of speeding in the pit lane, should it not be impossible to do in theory, given all the technology and gadgetry available to Formula One, the FIA, and the teams?
In theory, yes.
And not
However,
in the way that they do it currently, in a much more simple way, in my
oh,
mind at least. Because I read what the reasoning for all of this kerfuffle in Monaco was, and it's because turn in to the pit lane being different in Monaco than it is pretty much everywhere else. And so the same at the exits. And even with the reduction in pit lane speed, you still find a way to somehow technically be speeding in the pit lane, even though you probably aren't. It's just the way it comes across given the nature of the circuit. And so my simple idea, and this is where I'm just wanting to see if I'm insane or if I'm just somehow pointing out the obvious, I don't know. It's one of those days. Why is it not possible to have a sensor in the ground at the pit entry and the pit exit that when you drive over it in a Formula One car, it communicates with software within the car to literally limit it to not be able to go faster than 60 kilometers an hour while you're there. So you can still, speed up, slow down, whatever, and then go about your business and leave again. Is that too simple or am I missing something?
you're missing something here, and importantly, it's the way that the pit lane speed is measured. So all the cars have their pit
Yes, but
limit.
is that not stupid?
Uh, it is because it's opened up this flaw, and I'll explain, and it will make sense why what's
So
happened.
I understand how they measure it and everything. I'm just thinking if you were doing it from scratch, what would be wrong with my idea?
I
Because
don't
again, you
even.
would circumvent the problem that
Mhm.
you were about to tell me about, which I
Yeah,
understand. I'm not trying to fix the current thing. I'm just trying to rewrite it because
yeah.
it's something that I feel like, how is this always a thing? Because you have the supposed button on the steering wheel to limit yourself. But I feel like they've got so many buttons and things to remember anyway. Let's take this one off their hands. Let's just redo all of it.
None of the cars were traveling in excess. velocity at any instant in the designated
You
pit.
realize already how stupid this sounds.
Yes, because essentially Alpine showed the data, and what's this pit lane speed limit in Monaco? It's 60
60
kilometers an hour.
compared
And
to normal 80.
Alpine keep theirs pinned in that sense at 59.5 kilometers an hour. So it gives them a little bit of leeway just to allow
Hmm.
it to degrade and everything to work. So that's fine. The problem is, it's not because of the angle of the entry, it's because there's a way of straight lining it that means that your average speed over the measured distance is
Yeah,
higher
I was
because
oversimplifying.
you're covering less distance in the anticipated amount of time, and therefore your
Hmm.
speed is higher.
Yeah.
Your instantaneous velocity is no different, but your speed is higher because speed is distance over time, less distance over the same time, higher speed. So the
Again, though, is that not stupid?
it's a little bit stupid, but at the same time, this also exposes or is a great example of how much teams are trying to finesse the system. And we've seen this before with sort of
Which, by all means, do that. But then is that not more of an incentive to go, hang on, should we find a better way of doing this so that they can't?
uh, on
Because
the
it's
one
at their own detriment at the end of the day. It clearly didn't benefit anyone, did it? Because it ultimately buggered them.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, but it's the same as sort of when you get cheating, when you get people running like brake cooling systems, or you get people running sort of like lead shot to meet ballast weights and so on and so forth. It's one of those very weird things of it's allowed because it's not technically against the rules, but it's against the spirit of the competition, so on and so forth. And it's one of those things that it's weird because people go, well, surely if you because it's not just a static speed camera either. A lot of people just anticipate
Hmm.
there's someone at the end
Well,
of
yeah, that's another thing that goes, why is it not? Because yes, I understand why, but also why is it not?
Hmm. So
It
it's
would be surely easier if it was.
but then
Are
you've
we not
got
overcomplicating a simple situation?
but then you've got to build that into the ground at all the circuits, and not all the circuits have
I feel
a
like there'd
ton
be
of
a simple enough
circuits.
way to do that though without having to really destroy everything. I feel like if they wanted to do that or a version of it, they could without it being over. I'm not criticizing you, I realize this,
Yeah,
but I'm just saying I feel like, you saw all the stuff they were able to do scientifically during the pandemic. If you've got enough incentive, you can do it. So what is the problem? Yes. Because you just think it was not the most entertaining Monaco Grand Prix in certain respects. I'm always of I appreciate the endurance aspect, but then whenever you have it here, or you look at Austria is with track limits a lot of the time. Um, Mark Webber always said if you don't want people going wide at turn four and bar weighing, put a brick wall there. They'll soon enough not go over the track limits. It's really frustrating when these things impact the race and then post race as well. We still have this right of review with Alpine that I don't think we even have a conclusion yet officially
I
from. I
think
don't think
it's
anything's
protocol.
coming from it, but it's frustrating that we don't have one way or the other on that. And you just go, can I not just enjoy the racing for what it is without all this unnecessary nonsense? That was the only reason I wanted to mention that because it just
Yeah.
seems such an overcomplicated way of solving what feels like a simple problem.
Hmm. But I think the problem here is that it's never happened before, so the FIA hasn't noticed that people are doing this yet, and this is the first time it's happened, and now they're going to have to look at changing it. It's the same as sort of the Brabham fan car or the six-wheel Tyrrell, is that no one's thought to it, no one's been caught out doing it yet. Therefore, the authorities aren't aware that it's happening. But now that people have been caught out for doing it, the authorities will have to clamp down on it. So there will now either be changes to how it's marked out, how it's measured. We'll see.
Don't want to be here this time next year and having the same argument. That's the last thing I'll say on it because if they do, there is going to be much annoyance.
Yeah, it will be one of those things that the FIA will be stupid to not change. But there we go. That's Formula One. We know that they're often a bit thick when it comes to this sort of thing. With that out of the way, we've got a lot of Monaco Grand Prix. We've got the final 10 laps of the Monaco Grand Prix to get into, functionally speaking. There were a few bits before that, though, including qualifying, which was very interesting. But we'll start at the top with Mercedes. Russell qualifies sixth, finishes the Grand Prix in 12th for a number of reasons. Antonelli, meanwhile, qualifies on pole and, as expected, goes on to win the race.
Yeah, it's at the point now where you can't say anything other than it was a standout performance from Antonelli because if you take it as a Monaco Grand Prix where you have my appreciation of it, which is not for the action or lack thereof and overtaking or lack thereof, it's the driver versus the circuit more than anything else. and he didn't put a foot wrong. He is at one with that car at the moment, it would seem, and while that streak you would think will have to end at some point, as he's now matched Hamilton's win record for most Grand Prix in a row, which five now. I think the record is 11 around that sort of
Oh,
thing. I think with
yeah.
Schumacher or Vettel or Verstappen, one of those. Um, I don't necessarily want him beating that this year. So there's not really much to say on him. He just controlled everything superbly from lights out to the race restart, the red flag, everything. Other side of the carriage, much different story, as I think this is where the meat of the Mercedes bit of this podcast will be. And I'm interested to get your take on this because for a team like Mercedes, you see them having any kind of genuine reasoning for being that sloppy when it came to Russell's serving of his time penalty? Because, and this is not meant to be a slight against the likes of Aston Martin or Cadillac, but if there were a team to fumble that, you would expect it to be someone at the bottom end, not a championship winning, proven race winning team this season in
Hmm.
Mercedes with an experienced driver who is questioning what are we doing about this penalty? And it brings up that, the old argument that we don't necessarily argue about, but we definitely discuss of it's a team sport, but how much do you punish the driver for a mistake that wasn't his in that respect? You know, okay, so he caused himself to have the time penalty, which also potentially goes back to other things, but that's a separate matter. Um, but the team absolutely dropped the ball and fumbled it massively when it came to serving it, and ultimately cost him a good chunk of points. Ruined what was already an unraveling race, but damage control was not in their vocabulary, so not acceptable for a team like Mercedes.
Yeah, I'll get to the Mercedes point, especially in a weekend where I don't know if you followed the full story of Racing Bulls this weekend and the fact that maybe sort
Hmm,
of 20 minutes before drivers were supposed to be on the grid, they were still
yeah,
putting Liam Lawson's car back together, a car that would go on to finish the race, what, fifth, sixth?
fifth and sixth
Yeah.
on
And
merit.
yeah, and they were able to put together a phenomenal strategy this weekend as well. And that's Racing Bulls, that's Toro Rosso, it's the junior team that you don't expect a lot of, but then Mercedes on the flip side of that coin are fumbling it. But I'll get back to them in a minute. I'll go back to the Antonelli point because for me it was also imperious. It was untouchable. He doesn't. There was an interesting moment if you're watching the sort of Sky broadcast where does like a final piece with the camera with Martin Brundle after the national anthem, and then wanders off. And there's this great shot of him talking with his engineers, but stood by his car on the grid. And there is this moment where you can just see his expression and his eyes change. And it's that terrifying moment where if you've ever looked in the visor of a racing driver and you can tell they're not in this world, and it's that moment where you go, they're locked in. And you see it happen with Antonelli before he's even gotten in the car. It's his final steps as he's processing and getting ready to get in the car that he changes gear. And that is world championship mentality. You look at the way that Rosberg's mentality shifted for the 2016 run, and it was that complete and all out focus. And the fact that Antonelli just turns it on a dime in an instant. He's like, the TV cameras are gone, it's go time. And it's not surprising that he has that ability to do so. And I think
What's going to
it's
be interesting now, though, is seeing how consistent he can be with that because he's not had to do that week in, week out just yet. He's had sizable gaps between each Grand Prix, whereas now we've got five races in 7 weeks.
mm,
And that's going to be very interesting because, you know, it's going to run out at some point, be it
mm,
mechanical issue or you look at Austria last year, he and Max just came together. It happens.
yeah,
And it's going to be different to try and pick yourself up from something like that when you're nowhere near the championship fight, easy for me to say, compared to when you are leading it quite
yeah,
comfortably and how much you potentially hemorrhage after that. Or he does what you've just been describing, locks in again, and yeah, we're all going, damn, that
yeah.
didn't last as long as we thought it was going to. He's on another run there.
Yeah, if he's able to, this is going to be the thing. So obviously, weekend coming, we go to Barcelona, isn't it, this weekend? So if he's able to repeat the process week after week, we've got a problem on our hands championship wise because this is
Hmm.
going to be relentless. But it's that really interesting behavior and mentality that I spotted on the broadcast. It was really interesting to watch that. And you look at the other drivers that are still doing interesting routines and getting themselves psyched up and warmed up and limbered up, and for him, it's just switched, and it's eerie watching it happen. Um, but also he doesn't care who he's alongside. Like he was starting on the front row of a grid with Lewis Hamilton next to him and Max Verstappen behind him. That's a combined
No,
what?
other way around.
No, other way around. No, Hamilton was next to him and then Verstappen behind him.
No, Max was qualified in second, didn't he?
No, Max was third.
Was he third?
He was third.
I've got Hamilton queued qualifying third here. Let me have a look.
I can't remember. Either way, he was surrounded by what? Hamilton's
He's surrounded by, yeah,
11
what,
world titles
11,
in the
12,
sport.
yeah.
Some of the greatest drivers of the current generation on the field. And to him, it's just the car that's starting next to him and just takes off into the distance. That Mercedes hasn't started well. They've figured out how to start it well. And he's still got that sort of presence of mind to just lock in and go for it. And his coalescence with Bono as well is really incredible. The way they're able to communicate. And I think a lot of this is also down to Bono being genuinely world class in what he does. And he was speaking about Peter Bonington was speaking about him post qualifying, saying how Kimi builds over a weekend. He engages in the car development. He knows where the car's going to start off on a Friday in FP1. It isn't going to be perfect, and it's up to him to tell the team and communicate to the team what he wants doing to the car, what changes he wants, what tire pressure, spring rates, ride heights, aero rakes, aero approaches on the front and rear wings, and so on and so forth, and getting that all set up. And last year was his rookie year in having to do that, having to learn who his team members are, having to learn how to communicate to them, having to learn what the adjustments are. And now we've obviously got a new car, but he knows how to do that communication as well. And that's one of the really impressive things.
That is also interesting in the respect when you look at Lewis at Ferrari, because he's in the same boat in a lot of ways, but obviously with a vast amount of more experience and in a
Mm.
very different part of his career. But you're seeing that same
Click with the
tough
talk.
first year, but learning everything he needs to know so he knows what to correct for the second year. And you can see that's already happening with the results that Lewis is getting now.
Yeah,
And so you've got these two people who, I don't know how much of a championship fight we're going to get between these two. It's certainly not what we were potentially expecting at
no.
the start of the year. But if that gap can be narrowed down somewhat one way or the other, and we can see the Ferrari get a bit better on the car side of things so that they can actually fight for longer properly, not just a Australia China situation where it's the first
Mm.
third maybe and
No.
then Mercedes goes up and does its thing, which would be a very interesting battle that we would have dreamed of
Yeah, and
before.
it's Kimi's ability to engage in that process, find the car he wants to be underneath him, and then find the pace in himself. And again, we talk about car setup, being able to build a car over a weekend as being one of those world championship defining things. Look at how Verstappen was so easily able to get into a car that was bad on a Friday, complain about grip in FP2 and FP3, get to Q1 and just top the timing sheets because he was able to sit down with the engineering team and go, I need this, I need this, I need this. We need to change this, we need to change this, get in the car, and it's a different animal. And that would always leave his teammate far behind because his teammate wasn't able to have that conversation and the way that Lewis has been able to always do that. And I'll get to Lewis when we get to Ferrari as well, because I think there's been the same click there. And you said it as well. But for Kimi, it's just that thing of we're seeing the championship building behavior really coming in and really early on. And it's going to be a huge threat to anyone who wants to try and battle him. And then in the race, that ability to open up a gap, maintain it, and then measure it and keep it sort of keep the people behind him exactly where he wants them to be, with seemingly from the general broad sort of public feed perspective, very little interference from Bono. You know, there's going to be a lot of communication between radio engineers, but go back to how much communication we saw with Lando Norris and Will Joseph, his engineer. It was very much lap after lap of detail of data of where he needs to be braking, where he needs to be charging, where he needs to be changing this, brake balances here, gaps to people behind. Whereas we're not hearing that this season between Kimi and Bono. We're hearing the celebrations at the end. We're hearing the odd, cool, maintain that gap. And then it goes quiet again. And it's again one of those big differences that I think is going to be really key as the season unravels. Um, so for me, Kimi, I don't have any criticism. I think that the thing I'm most amazed about is the remarkable way in which he's built his weekend.
I think
Meanwhile,
this is why he doesn't need to win the title this year. He may do, but he
yeah,
doesn't need to because from what we've already seen, he's doing enough to prove Toto right in putting all the time, effort, and money into him in the first place. And you go, he's only 19. He's still got a long career ahead of him if he wants it. And so, while he may go on and get the title this year, he doesn't need it, and that's a really interesting position to be in because there's very few people in history you can say that about where they're in a position to win it, but not winning it is not going to count
End of the
against
world.
them.
Yeah,
It's such an odd thing. I don't know who else is on that list. I'm going to have to go back and look because
yeah,
it's going to be a short list.
yeah. Maybe Lewis at McLaren in that
Yeah, I was
first
thinking in
season,
the
I think.
first season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking about like Kimi's winning streak. He's on 5 races at the moment, which ties in with Verstappen's 2022 run. It ties in with Lewis Hamilton, who had a run in 2020 and in 2014. It ties in with Schumacher run, a Mansell run, a Clark run, a Brabham run. The next on the list is 6 wins in a row with Schumacher. Then it's a 7 win in the row streak for Rosberg and a Schumacher. And then it's Alberto Ascari also had a 7 win streak.
Mm.
Then you get to the nines where it's Verstappen and Vettel, and then you get to 10. It was Verstappen from 23 in Miami to 23 in the Italian Grand Prix. And we're already looking at a point where we're sort of going, I
That's
don't think it's
doable.
unreasonable, really, at the rate he's achieving things. Other side of the Mercedes garage, though, very different story. The team just went to pot, fumbling George's speeding penalty in a hurry. Usually, Mercedes are so unflappable. Think back to some of their iconic double stack pit stops where they'd have both cars come through and
Monaco and pit stops for Mercedes, though.
oh,
There's
just
something
bad.
there.
Yeah. Um, it was, I think the thing was they didn't notice that, or George, there was either miscommunication or George pitted when he wasn't supposed to, but he was supposed to have pitted the next time they came through the pit lane, essentially, giving them time to prepare and clear the pit box, to have him wait five
Hmm.
seconds, serve the penalty, tyres, go. And they were like, it's going to cost him a lot. It cost him more in the end because I don't know what went wrong. There was just this breakdown in communication. And the problem is when you're up against what I led into this with the communication aspect of Antonelli and Bono, you look at Russell, and I can't
That's why I
remember
question it. How can you get it so right
right
and
on
yet
one
so
side.
wrong?
Yeah, it's stark. And yeah, Kimi's lead over Lewis in second now in the Drivers' Championship is 66 points. Over his teammate at 68 in third, nearly 3 clear race wins. George did everything he could this weekend, but it wasn't enough. Even his qualifying pace, he says he wasn't getting close. And that begs the question, who can? The other world champions of the grid, Lewis and Max, ran him close in qualifying, but Kimi was just able to extend it that bit
I
more.
think that's the problem. It's not even the qualifying, because the qualifying is one thing, and that's obviously concerning, but you don't get any points for Saturday. Sunday is where it is, and I think both Red Bull and Ferrari is obviously the one that's closer to it, need to find that extra bit of something so that they can at least keep the fight going for longer, so that if George is still wherever he is and if he's not coming up, you've at least got both of your cars in Leclerc and Hadjar there to help you and try and bugger him on strategy somehow so that you can grab the odd win away, just to at least make him work a bit harder for and see if you can put some pressure on in that respect, because otherwise, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think Russell on any other circuit on any other weekend would be up there where you were able to overtake, you're able to make those moves and challenge, and you can use the overtake modes and the
We've
straight
been
line
saying
set.
that about some of the other races that we've had since Australia, though.
That's very true. It's such a tricky one because I don't want to write George off this early into the season. We're
Oh
six
no, I
rounds
don't
in. I
want to
don't want to
either,
write
but
the guy off.
he needs Lando sort of season from last year where Piastri had everything in control, and then for one reason or another things just start to
Just
unravel. The
nosedives.
difference is it's Mercedes and not McLaren,
Hmm.
and I don't see that happening in the same
No,
way.
no. Mercedes will have one error and they will redouble their efforts to make sure that never happens again. But the problem is you're now 68 points behind your teammate. And I
And
don't
have
want
to
to
get past Lewis in the process to even
have to
get
get
to him,
past
and that's not something you want to have to do on any day.
have to get past Lewis in the championship, but also very likely have to get past Lewis and Charles on track and maybe Verstappen. And I think it's
Hmm.
not unreasonable to say possibly Hadjar at this point if we're getting to the point where Hadjar's now
Hadjar
got
at least every
a
now and
car.
again,
Yeah. If Hadjar gets a good qualifying, he's not going to let you come past. And
maybe
I
a Piastri
maybe a Piastri.
when the car works.
Yeah. Um, there is this painful thing, and I don't want to say it. I don't want to commit it to record, but George may have to.
However,
However, George may have to suck it up and accept that he's the new Sterling Moss, the great Brit to never achieve that total victory. He's got all the skills, he's got the right car at the right time, but much like Moss, it just never happened because you look at the guys that Moss had to beat, and
be fair, I would with on Moss's front, I'm pretty sure he lost one championship because he was just an absolute gentleman and gave his driver a spare car, which I don't see anyone doing these days.
I
And
certainly can't see
that's
George
something
doing
you
it.
can't
Yeah,
can't really go against. But I know what you mean. Is the modern day equivalent certainly at the rate it's going. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky one to to undo all of the 68 points he needs and then go on. It's not impossible, but it's going to require a lot of good luck to come his way and a lot of bad luck to go Kimi's.
Mm. There's there's a lot of obstacles in the way, and we'll get to two red obstacles now with Ferrari. Hamilton qualifies third, finishes second. Leclerc qualifies fourth, and would unfortunately DNF.
Just when you thought there weren't any more records for Lewis to try and equal or beat, you find another one. And I think at the rate he's going, he could beat this next year. He's now equaled Senna's record for most podiums at Monaco. Um, Mad, just mad. Eight, if anyone's keeping count. He did all he could though this weekend, and I think that the to go back to what we were saying about Antonelli, the biggest piece of evidence for that was the race restart. You know, he didn't have Verstappen in the way; he could just go. He was alongside him; he could go straight for him. But already by the time they were going up the hill, Antonelli was gone, and there's only so much you can do about that. You can put Lewis in a Mercedes, and that's going to be the only way he's going to be able to do something about that at the moment, and that's frustrating from a neutral's perspective because you want to see at least a bit of a fight. You don't have to rely on it to be George and Antonelli every weekend like it is in Canada,
Mm.
um, especially at a weekend where George isn't there. Um, I think a little bit like Polo and IndyCar, you do need reliability issues to happen to Antonelli to try and beat him, or at least try and claw your way back some point. So I don't know what you do otherwise.
Yeah.
Lewis, as you said, has moved ahead of Russell and Leclerc in the championship now. And he and Antonelli are the only two drivers already to score points, sorry, in every single Grand Prix and sprint so far this season. That's just an interesting storyline to watch. And I don't know where that's going yet, because obviously we're only 6 rounds in compared to when we get to Abu Dhabi or wherever the season ends. But that's going to be quite a fun ding dong to see. It reminds me already of Charles Leclerc's 24 season, where aside from two races outside the points and one DNF, he was in the top five for every single Grand Prix. It does feel like it could be one of those years for Lewis and Kimi.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. I predicted Lewis Hamilton to come second this year, but admittedly, I said he was going to come second to Charles Leclerc. You've predicted him to win
Still
this
time.
season. Unlikely. We've both fumbled with Antonelli. You've picked him to come sixth. I picked him to come seventh.
Oof.
Yeah.
Hey, if we prove to be right on that one, we're in for a heck of a second part of this season.
Oh yeah, certainly in both of our cases, I'm really wondering what both the Ferraris do, what George Russell does. In your case, what Max Verstappen does, who somehow makes his way up to fourth. In my case, Oscar Piastri, who I think is currently in fourth or something, does something impressive. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I've also got a lot of hope pinned on Williams, where both of them overtake Isaac Hadjar to finish eighth and ninth. Um, yeah, you've
I
seen
like
so how
the
many.
odds on that.
You've got Nico Hulkenberg ninth and Alonso 10th, so I wouldn't be too hasty in your chastisement.
They're playing it cool.
They're playing the long game.
They're gonna be there at the end. Doesn't matter where you start, where you finish. I mean, double points in Abu Dhabi, and they're gonna finish 1-2.
We'll wait and see. But yeah, for me with Ferrari, it's a solid weekend for them, really. Ultimately, there wasn't anything hugely wrong with what they did, which is impressive. Functionally, the team
Just
did everything
racing.
right. Yeah, the pace was there in the car, but there's more going on behind the scenes, and this is where I think the Ferrari debacle gets very interesting. So obviously, going into the weekend, we announced that Charles Leclerc extended his contract with Ferrari. Uh, wasn't happy with the brakes this weekend. Blamed them for the error through Anthony Noakes, which turned out to be more that the corner had become a rally stage section. But there's also rumours out there that from Maranello that Lewis has swapped brake supplier for his car and has moved back to a compound he's familiar with at Mercedes, while Charles has retained Brembo, which is the official partner for Ferrari. Lewis had already called out how uncomfortable he is with Ferrari's brakes, the way that he doesn't like the feel, the bite, the way they degrade, the way they heat up, the way they retain heat and pressure. Um, and there are rumors that suggest he swapped to Carbon Industries, which supplied the Mercedes. Obviously, both cars have to be supplied and fitted identically, which suggests that maybe they've also moved Charles across to the Carbon Industries one, and he's now with a braking compound he's unfamiliar with. Or they're being very legal and running two different braking compounds on the car, which would somehow ruin everything. Um, And while it's easy to tar Charles with the Golden Boy brush, Lewis is a seven-time champion at a team run by the man who saw him in his dominant GP2 championship. Is there more going on behind the scenes? One does have to question it. Lewis overall, though, is in a very happy place at the moment. His new race engineer, though supposed to be a temporary appointment, seems to be very sort of long term in the fact that they communicate well, they understand each other, and the pace has come from it as a partnership. Monaco and Canada are big braking circuits, and now he's got the car set up. He's up to speed.
Yeah, it's nice to see Lewis back up there and not a million miles away. I know that internally is seemingly uncomfortable, at the moment, but it's not the Statham dominance just
Mm.
yet in terms of 23. He's still just about there, you know, and especially, well, this weekend at least, and in Canada, it wasn't a million miles away. It wasn't great because you still had everyone up to and including not including P3, sorry, but everyone up to third launch, I think, at one point before Stroll crashed, and have like 2 weekends in a row is ridiculous. Um, but for the two cars outside of the Mercedes to be the Ferraris, you're glad you're in a Ferrari, and you're glad you're Lewis Hamilton, and it's just so good to see him back in this sort of period of regeneration almost. It's not that it's almost like he's doing what Ricardo intended to do, you know, when he said in the Italian Grand Prix when he won that it's like, oh, I never left. It's like he's doing that, but then he's going on to do what we hoped Ricardo would do after that win, and he's doing it consistently now. He got on the podium in China. He's now back up there consistently, and you've got to assume that if anyone was going to win a race outside of the Mercedes this year, it's going to be the Ferraris. It's just a matter of when, not if, at this point.
Yeah, I think it's very likely. And if we hark back to, was it the preview for Monaco or the review from Canada, where the circuit often chooses its winner? I
That was
Silverstone
the Indy 500, yeah,
Indy
kind of
500 when we
idea.
talked about that. Yeah, that maybe
Silverstone does feel a
Silverstone.
bit like that. Some days Monza, especially, does feel like that. Some years when you had that period where the previous winner DNF the following year, and then
Yeah,
you had just at the right time it seemed to be that sort of thing. And yeah, I'm not against those two circuits in particular being the two.
yeah. There's every chance that for Lewis, who's come good at Ferrari now, that those circuits could work. And again, he goes well at Silverstone. It's one of his favorite circuits. That home crowd really amps him up, and it's a circuit that should just about suit the Ferrari, especially now
It
he's
would
got
just
the
be
brakes.
interesting as well to see psychological break potentially for Antonelli if he lost Monza to Lewis, if
Mm,
it's them in the championship, just to see what that would do to him, especially if, either if he's P2 or if he's just not even on the podium for whatever reason. That would be really interesting to see, just from a drama perspective.
yeah, it would be.
He's got
It,
a long career. It's
yeah,
fine. He doesn't
he's
need to be there
fine.
this year.
He'll move on from it, but it would be interesting to see what his next race does, because I think from Monza, do we
Hmm.
go to
Madrid,
Madrid? So unproven,
which
tricky
is new
circuit,
for
it's
everyone. So
closed.
yeah,
Yeah,
potential for calamity.
we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's the Ferrari situation is interesting. I don't think there's a lot to say about Charles' performance this weekend. It was good. It had a few of the usual Charles errors in qualifying,
He
but
reminded me a bit of Ayrton Senna in the sense of he keeps not overdriving, but always really pushing over the limit to try and find where the limit is. And he would rather lose it that way than not
yeah,
try.
he
And so
tended not
he's
to
his own worst enemy,
100%.
particularly in Monaco, where we've seen this a lot of times before.
He takes the car to 102%, but that additional 2%
Hmm.
is usually where the barrier is as well, and that's unfortunate for
What
Charles.
happened?
Yeah. But he was running well in the race, and that's the thing. It was just
Hmm.
unfortunate that the gravel bit caught him out. But at the same time, I think Damon Hill said it about the pit lane speed limit. He said that it didn't catch all the other drivers out. The only other driver that gravel caught out was Lance Stroll. Everyone else made it over that bit fine. Where do you draw that line? Where do you draw that as a
I
piece of
draw the line, and I
consistency?
don't know who asked Damon Hill, so we should move on.
He was on the BBC commentary. Meanwhile, third place McLaren. Piastri qualifies seventh, finishes fourth. Norris qualifies eighth, does not finish. Mm.
Another case of reliability somewhere within the McLaren, 2 weekends in a row. Quite interesting. Piastri described it as a bit of a weird one, but he'll take it, which I suppose is the best way you could sum it up, really. strong result for the team, at least on one side of the garage when they needed it. Because if you've got one car not doing well, you at least want the other one to be able to manage. And that seemed to be the case for most teams this weekend in one respect or another.
Yeah.
Um, so Piastri, I think, is just quietly going about his business as per usual, and it's working out all right. Not really much to say. It's just interesting to keep an eye on this whole McLaren Mercedes potential. What was reliable, what wasn't? Was it part of the Mercedes stuff that they put into their cars? Was it something they made? What's going on there? How's that going to impact? So obviously we've seen that with Williams, we've seen that with McLaren. Just something to keep an eye on.
We haven't seen it with Alpine yet. Have we seen them suffer a reliability issue?
I don't think so, not yet, which is weird because you'd have thought out of all the teams
Hmm.
it would have been them. But yeah,
Alpine's design team is
not much to
practically.
say on this one for me. It's
Yeah.
just
I
Piastri
don't
doing Piastri things, and Norris he didn't seem
suffering
happy
Norris.
for most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, McLaren issue striking twice in one weekend because wasn't Norris out in one of the practice sessions as well off the top of my head, I think.
Yeah, FP2.
Yeah, because also that was gearbox failure though on that one because that
Mm,
was the marshals were unable to press the neutral button on the outside the cockpit and push the car out of the way down that escape road at Nouvelle Chicane. They ended up having to literally lift it and put the trolley under it and drag it off that way. The power unit problems could worry Mercedes, but again, the works team seems unflustered, bar that one issue that did bring Russell out in Canada. So it's kind of mixed, but it seems to be impacting other people more often than it is impacting them. I do maintain that it's a cooling package issue, and Merck is sitting on data that's causing the issue. Norris lost out at the start and couldn't find a way past. Hang on, I'll just mute that. So, Norris, where was that? Norris, yeah, lost out at the start and couldn't find a way past Gasly, which last year would have been dire, but this year that's their rivalry almost, which is really interesting, and not a pair you'd
mm.
ever think to see racing against one another. Um, Piastri made the most of a tricky weekend and a race where survival is key. He made that work. Sometimes you just got to be in it to score points.
Yeah, I think they know, or Piastri rather definitely knows that they're not in the position they were in last year, so they've just got to navigate the problems as best they can, which I think we only see a small percentage of what the actual problems are when you look back at their season so far. And he's just very good at keeping cool, calm, and collected when he's treading water so that you don't see all the frantic stuff going on beneath the surface. Whereas it's a bit more visible in other places, it feels like at the moment. His poker face is better than other people in that team, let's put it that way. Um, not sure what to expect of them moving forwards, but I think with Red Bull seemingly coming into their own, but they've got their own issues, but they seem to be more consistent, at least with when they have issues, with Alpine sort of sorting things out, and with Racing Bulls kind of coming into it now. I'm not saying all three teams will get past McLaren, but it's interesting that I'm even mentioning that as a possibility.
Yeah, if they haven't got two cars consistently out there fighting for it, it's a lot easier for certainly teams beyond Red Bull to make that catch. I mean, it does lead nicely into Red Bull, where Verstappen qualified second and would DNF, and Hadjar would qualify fifth and take his first podium for the Red Bull senior team.
Lucky for Verstappen because, well, I'm not necessarily convinced he would have got past certainly on track, although we did see that was doable at points, but more on that later. The strategy could have come into it where there could have been something to go, you know what, we've got a big enough gap back to whoever in third at that point, and why not risk it? We're not in a position where we're fighting for wins consistently anyway. Let's just see what we can do here and have a go. I think it was just the fact that we didn't get to find out that is frustrating because, you've got a driver like Verstappen. You can't rule anything out. If anyone's going to try something somewhere, it's going to be him. Um, Hedger, quite amusingly, he has an interesting relationship with Monaco. It involves mainly a lot of screaming and shouting, but it sort of still works out for him in the end.
Hmm.
Which, with the amount of issues he supposedly had with that car, which I'm not saying he didn't have issues, he clearly had some kind of issues, but it was just amazing how he was still able to drive around all of them in one way or another, despite the engineer coming on saying, "Yeah, we don't actually have a fix for that yet. We're working on it. We're working on it." Just repeatedly
Hmm.
finishes third, gets a podium, and then gets to have the fun quip with Lewis just before the podium going. We were hoping to get the youngest podium, but you're here.
The fact
And
that
then someone. pointing out to Lewis later that he's older than Antonelli and Hadjar combined,
Yeah.
which was a bit of an oof moment for Lewis there, but he took it well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting weekend for Hadjar. Verstappen, as always, one of those sort of what could have been races because you can never rule him out, truly. Um, but for Hadjar, I think it's one of those really interesting things. It's one of those, he's not going to be one of those drivers where you just have a weekend where everything changes. You go, oh, they're good now. It's going to be one of those moments where you go, oh, we saw this sort of improvement for
Good
certainly
gradual.
notable at certain weekends. I think this will
He
be one
reminds
of
me of
those.
Lawson and Lindblad in that way, in that they've also just been moving up recently, but it's not been an overnight thing. It's kind of like, huh, they're doing that repeatedly and just slowly, quietly getting up there.
Yeah, and for Hadjar, I think this could be the start of like the next stage of him sort of really developing and moving that yardstick on. And again, his drive through those issues was mega, working around the problems. We saw famously there was that line from Nikita Mazepin about trying to change settings while driving around Monaco. He's like, it's impossible. I can't do all that on the wheel while driving around Monaco. And Hadjar has obviously picked up the skill. He's gotten used to the steering wheel, the commands, the inputs, the changes, and that full sort of suite of what he's supposed to be able to do and put in that performance. And that's, I think, a really important thing, especially when things start going wrong, where you're going to be failing sensors, you're going to be defaulting settings, you're going to be changing maps and modes. It's a lot to work through when you're sort of going through essentially like two toggle switches here and there and going into like sub
Whilst
menu.
hurtling around the tight, twisty streets of Monte Carlo.
Monaco. Yeah, it's not easy, and there's a senior quality to it, and it's a good sign that he's settled at the team. He's obviously spending a lot of personal time developing, getting used to those settings, time in the sim, time practicing, time learning, because you can tell when the drivers can do like settings and switch changes by braille almost. They'll feel for the bit, and they know how many times to press it for this, and know how many times to press it for that. And that's a huge part of that personal development that a driver has to undertake and self-motivate to do. I think we're seeing that self-motivation from Hajar, and that's a really positive step forward that I'm enamored to see. I like it. I think it's good. I don't think it's going to turn him into a world champion. I'll level with you. It's going to turn him into a solid, engaging, and entertaining driver to watch on track. But if the Red Bull gets good, there's one problem with the Red Bull being good is the guy on the other side of the garage.
Years.
But anyway, it's a positive for Hadjar. I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things. He walks away from the weekend and can genuinely be proud of the efforts he put in. He was
And I
able
think
to
we
put,
weren't surprised to see him up there.
yeah,
And that's the thing, even in Zandvoort last year, you were a little surprised, but not too much. And he still
mm,
learned it himself. And then do that less than a year later at the top team, despite the issues that they're having, for us not to be surprised says a lot, I think.
yeah, he's earned it, and I think that's the important thing as well. S- I don't think speaking of earned it is the right link to get to Alpine. Um,
They earned
Gaz
it, they just didn't get it.
Yeah, they put in the hard yards, and it would have been nice to see Alpine on the podium here this weekend. I think Gasly really kind of deserved it. But yeah, Gasly qualifies ninth, finishes seventh, and Colapinto qualifies 14th and finishes 14th, which considering there were some retirements ahead of him and penalties as well, it's somehow a miracle he ended up back where he did, but we'll get to
He's
him.
an anomaly for a few reasons, but I'll start with Gasly because, like I say, it's such a shame he didn't get there. Because finishes third on the road, but then, along with George, they're going to sit in the bar afterwards, going, "Oh, what a
His
race that
engineer
was!"
hadn't told him because we see him go across the line celebrating like mad. He's like, I've got a podium at Monaco. And then his engineer's like, wait, bad news,
About that,
buddy.
yeah,
Like,
not good at all. Really deserved it. Really strong. Just did everything right. Got Norris at the start, like you said earlier, and was able to keep him behind, which I know is slightly easier in Monaco, but you still got to do it.
mm.
You're theoretically being put under pressure by the defending world champion. You'd expect to maybe have a couple of oopsie moments. Nothing like that at all.
No.
He didn't give him any kind of chance whatsoever.
And cars could go past one another this weekend. We did see it. We saw
Mm,
it with Lindblad on Albon. We saw Perez making up like a
hmm
billion places at one moment in time for some reason. He seemed to fast forward. Like you could overtake this weekend. It was tricky and required some interesting scenarios to manufacture it, but you could. And
But it's doable.
you'd expect a world champion to be able to manufacture those scenarios to be able to make an overtake, but he couldn't
But he
get past.
didn't.
He couldn't get past.
Colapinto, though, this this is one of the many other issues I have with the stewards, right? Because, and I'm skipping ahead slightly, but Hulkenberg gets a penalty for nudging into Sainz just round, what was it, Mirabeau, the hotel hairpin,
Mm.
and doesn't put him out the race. It's kind of what looked like a bit of a racing incident. He gets a 10-second penalty for that, and yet 2 corners later, Colapinto takes Sainz out at the exact same spot that he took Gasly out last year and gets nothing. That boggled my mind slightly, and I go, is the punishment the fact that he's already down in 14th? Because that's not how that should work. It doesn't really matter. It's if, I'm not saying that Hulkenberg's tap didn't contribute to Sainz leaving, but he was still being able to limp on afterwards. He was still very much driving around, otherwise he wouldn't have got 2 corners away. And yet Colapinto just nerfs into him and gets away with it. It was just yet another frustrating inconsistency, which made the race just that little bit less enjoyable when you go, I just want to enjoy the racing. For God's sake, let me
Mm.
have it.
And the I don't want to speak on the behalf of the stewards because that's a tricky thing to
I don't
do.
think they'd want you to do that anyway.
Uh, there were mitigating circumstances to the Colapinto science element to this, which was that Hulkenberg had already broken most of Sainz's suspension and none of his wheels were all pointing in the same direction. So it's kind of tricky to avoid a collision with a car that doesn't seem to know where it's going either. And equally, I think that sometimes the stewards do treat the Lowe's hairpin a bit like French motor insurance companies treat Notre Dame, which is you're not covered for anything that happens here. Best of luck. Um, if you go around the roundabout in France and you have an accident, it's always split 50-50. If you go around the Monaco hairpin in a race in a Formula One car and there's an accident, it's decreed a racing incident. And I think Colapinto sort of lucked into it at that point because the car was already broken. He didn't do anything that ultimately.
I can't remember who we were talking about previously, but I'm pretty sure we had this debate over someone else going, oh, this was X driver broke X rule, but this other driver broke a different rule, but was worse. So we'll only penalise the worst one and let the junior crime get away with it. It's like they're still all illegal. You shouldn't be
Yeah,
able to get away with any of it. So it's like, sure, but and I understand
and
Monaco is tight and everything, but I just found it interesting that of all the corners for Colkinter to do that, it was the exact same place that he
where
took
he'd
his
done it
teammate out
the
last
year
year.
before.
And you go, don't do that next year because we're going to start making more comments about it. Then you're going to
Yeah.
start getting nicknames.
Also, and I know that they don't do penalties based off of outcome. They do not do it based off of, oh, you caused this to happen, therefore we'll do this to you. It's always, you did this, you get this. It did not ruin Sainz's race. At that point, he was already out of the race,
It didn't
ultimately.
help it.
It didn't help it by any means, but I don't think with three wheels pointing in separate directions to one another, Sainz was going to be finishing that race in points paying position. That had already been
Well,
sorted
none of
out.
them were at that point.
No.
I don't think so. It shouldn't matter.
So I think they sort of just let
I
him.
just keep finding fundamental flaws of the rules and
Yeah,
want to rewrite that book.
I'm not trying to defend the rules either. I just think there's a.
No, it's kind of I
I
understand them.
can
It's
see the
like the
reason why
speeding. I
they've gone.
understand them,
Yeah,
but I just think, are we not doing this slightly haphazardly?
yeah. There should have been more consistency in how they're applied. Colapinto struggled a little in comparison this weekend to his teammate. It's not an easy circuit. It's a demanding weekend. Forgive, forget, and move on for both of them, really. However, they are just
Right.
2 points behind. For Gasly, though, I think it's a lot easier because he came away with points. The car is very clearly under him. And when we go back to more conventional circuits, dare I say, our first conventional circuits since what, China and Japan,
Hmm.
Spain, Austria, and Silverstone, I think that'll do Gasly and Colapinto well to rebalance things, get them back underway with probably their most competitive seasons to date for both of them, realistically speaking.
I'll say for Colapinto that's quite easy, but yes, for Gasly that'll be a more interesting measuring stick certainly.
Yeah. However, just 2 points behind Alpine, with both drivers clearly up to speed and operating well. It's racing bulls. Lawson qualifies 10th and finishes 5th. Meanwhile, Lindblad qualifies 15th and finishes 6th, which, if anyone else, if you're like, oh, that must have been a really interesting Grand Prix, it was at Monaco. Where did he find 9 places?
He's Elwood Lindblad. That's just what he does. Because obviously he's not been doing this every single weekend, but you can tell there is the learning, like we were talking about with Hadra earlier. There is that steady development going. Okay, some of these tracks are new to me because we don't race in them in Formula Two unless it's this year, and so I'm I'm learning everything from scratch. And Lawson, he's finally getting the chance, I feel like, to be in this environment where he's not under so much pressure to be in that top seat, to move up so quickly. He knows he's there for the year, that nothing's going to change. I think even if Hadjar was doing diabolically bad, they probably wouldn't do anything because they're not fighting for a title.
Yeah,
So it gives everyone room to breathe and develop at their own pace. And I think that's what they needed to do with Lawson last year when they put him at Red Bull. It would be so interesting to see.
yeah.
And Lindblad's obviously capitalising on that, and proof was in the pudding with that very nice overtake on Albon coming down the start finish straight. Um, Whereas Lawson, we didn't really see much of him, but that was good. We like it when we can say that because it means you're probably having just a quietly consistent, good, solid Grand Prix in the same way that Piastri, we didn't see too much of him, finishes fourth, and you go, good, no one saw me, no one's interfering with me. I survived all of that. Lovely. Let's move on. Nice bag of points. And yeah, I don't know where they're going to finish overall by the end of the season, but I said about McLaren, it's not out of the realm of possibility for Racing Bulls to finish out of McLaren.
No, I mean, I'll get into this because for me, as much as I have praise for the two drivers this weekend, I have a lot of praise for Racing Bulls.
Mm.
They had a really solid strategy from the team, as well as obviously drivers able to implement it, and they waiting on the chaos, just simply pitting that, and that gives you the advantage. The end result was they actually pitted under the red flag, I think, if my memory serves me correctly with this one.
Lindblad, they did, definitely.
Yeah, which helped preserve their drivers' places in the field. They sort of allowed all that chaos to happen around them, drivers moving forward and back, and just sort of shuffled up the order. And then for Lindblad, that chance to just sort of go, oh well, we'll just
What about that
completely
then?
completely free pit stop. Thank you very much. Genius work from the team, and the team was on the money all weekend. We said at the top of the show, Lawson had a lot of work done to his car. They turned it around in time for the action. They were clearly working as a cohesive unit and put together a really strong performance, both in the engineering, the mechanics side of things, the race sort of production side of things. Every element just came together for them this weekend. And I think for one of the smaller, lesser teams, yes, they're sort of the Red Bull Junior team. Yes, they have all the big backing. This is a team that is not natively by Red Bull given priority when it comes to personnel selection, let's say. And I think it's really interesting to see that they've clicked as a unit and produced a really solid weekend. I don't know why I'm coughing so much. They were the second best scoring team of the weekend, tied with Ferrari, earning both its drivers' career best finishes as well, which I think is just a phenomenal
Hamilton's
thing.
doing a lot of fending off drivers in pairs at the moment. If it's the age from the points from, it's like, just leave me alone. I'm just trying to do my job.
Yeah, it's really solid, and I think both drivers earned it too with solid and dependable drives
Mm.
that just kept them in the action. It's one of those we always say it. You if you want to score points, you've got to keep yourself in that points paying position, and some of those races you've just got to survive. Survival is the important element here. And they were able to. I concur that Lindblad's move on Albon was brilliant. I'm still baffled by Williams' strategy there, which for Albon was undone by a pairing of Hulkenberg and Colapinto, so he was able to move back up when they wiped out signs. Um, but all in for
But
racing
again, not
balls.
something you rely on as a
No,
strategy
it's
generally.
no one writes that down in their little notebook at the start of the race. We pit here, and then
You
on
write
this
that
lap,
down, screw this out,
yeah,
and go, no, that's a silly idea. Why am I even considering that? Let me
yeah,
get the proper idea now.
we pit the front driver, we swap drivers. One driver holds the other one back, or the rest of the train back. The second guy pits, and then um,
You hope
two people
someone
get
drives
past the
into
flow
us.
guy, and they wipe out the now lead guy, and then the other guy gets his place back. How does that work? I don't know, but it does. Um, anyway, all in for Racing Bulls, a mega weekend, and great to put them all in a good place moving into the coming weekends where the drivers and the team can build on that positive motion. A lot of being part of a team is having that sort of mental headspace, getting ahead in the game and getting ready. And as we go into Spain, a weekend where they probably could be quite competitive, they're all going to be in a really good headspace. They're like, right, we're on a good thing here. We can build on this. Let's keep it going. I think we could see back-to-back points for Racing Bulls on both cars this weekend coming.
And then we've got Austria, which is well Red Bull backyard, so you'd think they'd be fairly strong there. We could be in for quite a fun run here, but I am up for that, which is hopefully as well what we're going to see for Haas, because they could do with a bit of a better time as well, because again, they've just got a lot of potential, I feel like, but we're just not seeing it all come to fruition at the moment, unfortunately, in the way that we want to, and that Henry definitely wants to.
Mm. It. it's a ropey weekend, and I would like to see more from them when we reach a normal racing circuit. They might be able to figure things out a bit more easily when we just go to regular places. Bear in mind that Behrman went very well in China, normal race circuit, and
We've
Ocon
got
was,
normal race circuits all the way until Madrid now, so
yeah,
we're on a good stretch to see if we can measure that.
Ocon was on the pace in Japan as well. So the only two other pucker circuits we've seen this season where you can have a conventional race weekend, let's say. And I think that's going to be really important for Haas to get their feet back on the ground, get running again, and start sort of putting the chase in. Because, I mean, yeah, if Racing Bulls have got maybe another 2, 3 weekends on the bounce where they're going to be solid, Spain, Austria, Silverstone, I think they've famously gone quite well
Hmm.
in Silverstone before as well. We did speculate that for McLaren this could be dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Uh, I can see certainly Ollie Behrman being a problem for a slower McLaren driver in the
Yeah,
weekends coming.
I think interestingly here, the qualifying for both of them wasn't good. 19th and 17th, obviously Berman and DNS, but Ocon, he still managed to survive all of that and did exactly what teams like them need to do, which is survive the chaos when it rains and be in that position of if I'm not going to score points, and to be in a position where I can maybe get them post race if possible, which is essentially how he did it.
Hmm.
Once all the dust was settled, I forget where he crossed the line really, but
I think
he
he
was
was
in the position at least to move up slightly, I think, once all of the various things happened. Um, I think because of Perez's possible penalty that he was within that, he maybe moved up from getting 1 point to two with ninth. So we take it. Um, but yeah, a bit of a blip weekend. But I think again, yes, Monaco. You think back historically, they don't generally go too well. You look at the double wipeout they had with Perez. You look at Mick's car going in two as the most recent examples of how they've gone there. I think
hmm,
they'll be happy they finished. Never mind, got away with a couple of points for good measure.
hmm. I do also have to question um, the friction between the two teammates at Haas at the moment as well. There was a lot of moments where they were
Mm,
tripping over one another this weekend, or certainly at the start, though we never got a replay of it, despite the
practice
fact
and
that one,
qualifying as well. Especially there was, what's he doing backing me up here? Not
yeah,
giving me enough space there, and then you get to the actual race and it's more of the same.
apparently they crashed into one another, despite the fact that at one point Crofty says, "We don't like to show you replays here on Sky." And I was like, that's bullshit you
That's
do.
more or
Half
less
of the
what you
broadcast
exclusively do.
team. They then never showed the replay of Ocon and Behrman coming together in the opening lap or whatever it was, because somehow they managed to collide with one another there. I think it was nose into
Mm,
tail, so that was why Behrman ended up pitting very early on for a new wing,
mm.
and then had to retire anyway. So it's yeah, not a great weekend, one to move on from for Haas, and about the same for Williams, apart from the fact they managed to walk away with points somehow, much the same sort of thing. Sainz qualifies 12th, DNFs. Albon qualifies 11th and finishes 8th.
No more consecutive points for Sainz in Monaco, which is a shame. I think what was it, 8 or 10 years on the bounce that he was getting points there. Quite
Pretty good.
impressive.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know.
you've caught my cough.
Albon's second point haul somehow of the season only. So he's having a very. I think it was you who said it. After I think it was you who said it after Canada that Albon's having this sort of roller coaster points all season. It feels like it could be one of those sort of things where he jumps up, gets points, jumps down again. We see nothing for ages and then goes back up again. We don't want to see that. We want it more consistent, but at least one of their cars was in a position to capitalize on the craziness that went on towards the end of the race. Just their strategy was questionable, as we talked about.
Hmm. For Sainz, that is a loss of a points streak since he joined Formula One. So
Mm,
2015 through to present, minus obviously 2020 when we did not hold a Monaco Grand Prix. He had finished in the points every time we have visited the Principality, including at least 3 podium visits, all of them with Ferrari. So yeah, to now lose that is a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. And yeah, I mean the fact that did he do it last year in Williams? Yeah, last year in Williams he sniped one with finishing 10th. yeah, uh, just awkward. And the fact that the car clearly had pace as well to get that high up in qualifying, it's not like they were far
Hmm.
off, is the annoying thing. It's just one of those things where it's odd, and yeah, the strategy was strange. It was odd when they couldn't doing that when they couldn't guarantee a clean swap back either. It's not the slick performance I expect from Williams, and hopefully it's just a duff weekend and not a sign of the backroom politics that are currently unveiling themselves at Williams, upsetting the main efforts. We'll discuss the backroom politics on the Wednesday show as we preview the Spanish Grand Prix, because I think it's going to be the bigger news going into that weekend. There is a lot to unpack there, but I'll try and get a compressed version of events ready for the preview in a few short days. Um, yeah, importantly, points for Williams. It keeps them trundling along this season, keeps them ahead of Audi, where Hulkenberg finished qualified 13th, finished 13th, and Bortoleto qualified 16th and finished 11th.
Yeah, not much more to say on them from earlier. The penalty I thought was harsh. Colopin, sorry, not Colopinto, Bortoleto near the point, but just couldn't quite capitalize on all the chaos, which was a shame. But it's early days for that team still, and I've got faith in those two drivers. I think those two they should be there for at least the next 2 seasons each. It would make a lot of sense to keep this going, develop the car as much as possible, and I don't think that there's anything fundamentally wrong with the team. They just need to keep testing, need to keep doing their thing, and it's going all right. It's just not quite translating into points as much yet. And it's frustrating when we get Hulkenberg back close to the points, in the points, and then out.
That was the points. Yeah. Very harsh, but it was a clumsy move that ultimately ended Sainz's race. I think yeah, maybe overly harsh. What was the end up penalty for him? I can't remember.
10 seconds
Yeah. At least it's not a
for
grid
what
drop in
was,
Spain.
a last kind of. No, I'd rather take that in some respects because at least it doesn't impact your point that you're getting here because he was in ninth up to that point.
True.
Um, it's sort of the George uh, logic from last year of I'll I'll cut the corner to get ahead so I can get potentially more points so I can
I
just
get
get
free
five
air
seconds
to
up the road because
make
at
up.
least I get away from Albon for Christ's sake. Just let me
Yeah.
get away from him. But yeah, it's it's all right. They'll get there.
Yeah.
I don't worry about Audi too much. They seem
No.
to, despite the trouble that they had earlier in the season behind the scenes, they seem to be just being very Audi about everything, which is nice. And Freddie Slater had a decent weekend. He finished third in the feature race in F2. Spoilers.
Yeah. Not too bad.
So decent
Um,
F3, sorry, not
mm,
F2 just yet.
not yet. But yeah, a great survival run from Gabriel Bortolesso actually, and the car showed the highest top speeds across the weekend as well, which is really interesting. So there's a package there that clearly works, and Bortoletto's now is not to be forgotten while he's in sort of this back running car. There is a really good racing driver there. And again, if you can survive a Monaco weekend where everything seems to be thrown at you, not too bad. Um, Meanwhile, Aston Martin, speaking of surviving a race, Fernando Alonso qualifies 21st, finishes 10th. Lance Stroll qualifies 22nd and DNFs. But Alonso finishing 10th means they've scored a point, a single solitary sole point, but a point nonetheless. And
We'll
luck,
treasure it.
yeah, by luck largely. But as Dale Winton used to say, you've got to be in it to win it.
Yeah, I think Alonso was probably as bemused as everyone by the fact that he scored that point in the end because he was not expecting it, I think, quite frankly. But point to point, you take it. And it it feels, and I'm not suggesting that this is what they did in any way, shape, or form, but it's just an amusing thought that came to mind there of um, can we have Singapore 2008 Renault? No, we've got that at home, and this is the version at home that we've got of crash to help your teammate, but it's only for 10th place to get a point, so it can at least be 1 point away from Cadillac.
How far they have fallen, how far Alonso has fallen for that to now be the familiar scenario. The fact that also, yeah, I don't know. It's still a shonky weekend for the team overall, though, I think. I mean, qualifying
Hmm.
plumb last and only really being in it courtesy of Alonso having no penalties as well, just because your senior driver was able to not make any mistakes, really says quite a lot. Stroll earning track limits on a circuit where it's wall or tarmac, again, is a unique
Impressive.
achievement. Yeah. And then bidding it on the gravel was just remarkable to cap it off too. Um, Because Charles had been moaning about brake problems going through the weekend and into that issue. Maybe Lance had been as well, but I didn't hear it. I'm feeling kind this evening, so benefit of the doubt for him. They're here,
I'm not
but
convinced they turn on his radio most of the time, so even if he was, you probably wouldn't hear him.
yeah, I don't know. I'm just uninspired by them, despite the fact they've got a point this weekend. I'm like, okay, do it again then. Prove you can do this more than once and not by luck. Um, this is going to be upset when Bottas finishes eighth in Spain and they get a whole load more points and overtake them.
I wouldn't be against it. I think Bottas is a driver where I would, as much as it would have been nice to see Cadillac get their first points here, I kind of hope Bottas is the one who now gets their first points. It would just put to bed a lot of the rumours that he's also put to bed in quite colourful language. Um, and I think it just, I don't know, I feel like Bottas is somehow more a threat at that team than Perez is, regardless of contracts and all the rest of it. So it would just be nice for Bottas to then flip the script. He's sort of, as we talked about before, he seems to know what he signed up for more than Perez does. That's the impression that is given off
Yeah.
anyway. There may be nothing to it, but it's just the impression you get. So for him to then kind of coolly go about his business and then score some points would be great for Bottas. I'm softening back up to him slowly a bit. Now
Mm,
that he's here and I can't get rid of him, I'm accepting him more than I am of other drivers going, yeah, we'll see. Come on, Bottas, I'll come in from the cold, score a
yeah.
point.
I don't mind either of them. I think they both understand suddenly what they've gotten into and know they're going to be there for sort of a challenging long period of time where they do a lot of development work and then someone else ultimately might be able to snipe the glory from them when the next generation of drivers to reach that team. But I think they both understand why they're there is because they need old hands to steady the ship and to teach a team how to be a
Mm.
team. But yeah, it was so close to success. Perez's pace in the race and his aggressive race worked really well to generate positions. Go back through his onboard footage, watch that opening sequence, and it's phenomenal. He just sort of comes out of the blocks and decides just could drive past everyone. And Cadillac are making steps, and but there's still a lot to be sorted, like the cooling of the brakes or whatever the hell happened to Bottas. I think he overheated as well, so they got their cooling package set up wrong this weekend. So it's clearly still a team that's learning how to set up for a weekend, and that's why they need a Perez and a Bottas, two people that have done it for over a decade at
Getting
high
quite
teams.
a bit more interested in what will be the documentary that Keanu Reeves is doing on towards the end of the season when that comes out, I presume, because it just feels like you don't get to see um, this kind of thing in Formula One very often, where you'll see backmarker teams, but you won't see a brand new backmarker team trying to figure it out so that they can get the top, learning around the mistakes that they're making and trying to avoid ones that the other teams at the back have made consistently and don't seem to be able to learn from one generation to the next. So it's going to be interesting to see how these issues are perceived within the team and what success is to them
Mm.
compared to what it is to the other to someone like Aston Martin or someone like Williams. Um, because we've just not had it from this angle since Haas came in, and even then they had success straight away,
Yeah.
amusingly. So they kind of did it in reverse. So I'm kind of yeah, I don't know. It's weird with Cadillac, but I'm kind of semi enjoying their presence because they've not really made one, but they're there and they are.
Mm.
It's kind of weird thing going on with them.
They've not upset the apple cart and spoiled things, but at the same time,
Mm,
they've not really wowed us with anything in particular yet either. So it's just kind of you're left going, okay, well they're here. They're doing
mm.
Formula One every weekend.
It
Not very
feels like
well.
what you want with the drivers when they come into Formula One for the first time. You know, you look at your rookies from last year, the year before, and when Leclerc and his generation came in, you go, I don't want you winning straight away within the first 2 or 3 years. I want you to have your year at Sauber, your year at Williams to suffer
Mm,
just appropriate amount, but also then to see what you're capable of in those cars. Because if you can score points in like George was able to do in the Williams, like Charles was able to do with his P6 in Baku when he was in Sauber, you know, they go, oh, when we give them the tools, they're going to be great. Because as much as you know, it's impressive to have a once in a generation driver. You don't want that all the time because then you don't leave any room for these other really great drivers, but you don't get to see that enough because there's just that one person at the head of the queue. And
mm.
Cadillac feel like they're doing the team version of that, going, we're going to have to suffer a little bit. But in theory, this should work out for us.
Yeah, I think that it'll be a bit like Williams was last season, they will build themselves through the year, and then we'll get to the point where sort of every other weekend Cadillac are finishing with sort of like a P10 or a P9, or if they get lucky, a
Mm.
P6. And we're going to be like, okay, that's really good. That's an interesting way to round out like your first season as a Formula One team is to be able to sort of
If
build
Brazil's
yourself.
wet,
Yeah.
that could be a weird double podium for Cadillac.
Yeah. I don't think they'll go quite that far, but I mean, it's not unreasonable this season. There's some weird things happening.
I would predict that, but I think I've already been outlandish with way in advance predictions for Brazil, so I'll circle back to that at a separate point.
Have
I
we?
may have said a podium for Perez at Mexico instead, so I may be going for an absolute charge from Cadillac towards the end of the season. But
Yeah, you said Bamman to win and Perez second for Mexico. You've left Brazil
oof,
open. If you would you like to install a double Cadillac podium?
I'll leave it for now and meditate on it.
Okay.
See if that's wise.
Speaking of predictions, or more accurately, our winners and spinners, which is the next section of the podcast. Winner this weekend for you, Mr. Albers Daily.
It was Hamilton. I think, you know, there's no reason for him not to be. Kimi seems too obvious an answer, and everyone else was sort of just messy outside of racing balls, it felt like. So Lewis for my other obvious answer.
Fair enough. For me, I'm going for a rogue choice, Bernie Collins. For those of us that get the Sky feed, she was phenomenal this weekend. There was a lot happening, and out of anyone on the broadcast team, she seemed to be the most across it and able to accurately sort of bring you meaningful insights from it. And I think it was a really, really good piece of broadcasting. Driving wise, I've got to pick a driver. Antonelli's kind of an obvious one. I was really pleased with how Hajar put together his weekend, though. It was challenging. He qualified well. He put up with a lot during that race and didn't lose his head as much as he has a propensity to do, let's say. Because you and I do often refer to him as France's angriest man. And
Not inaccurately.
no, but this weekend he found a handle for it and was
I was
doing
worried
what
we were going to get F2 Hajar flashbacks at one point, so
I was also
particularly in Monaco.
anticipating. Yeah, I was also anticipating that. Although also Isaac Hajar F2 flashbacks in Monaco, him with that brilliant reaction to finding a slow-moving Ritomo Miata in the tunnel. So
Yes, swings and roundabouts.
yeah, but yeah, so driving Hajar phenomenal and broader spread of things. Bernie
If
Collins
we
for
go
just
for
being
broader
excellent.
spread of things, I'll go for Martin Brundle for just telling people what the state of play is when they try muscling him out the way. As
Don't
the
touch
little
me.
mini gangster he is, he feels like he's the natural successor to Bernie Ecclestone in that respect of going, just because I'm a small guy in comparison to you doesn't mean you can do what you want. This is my domain. Get out of the way. I
What
love
was the
that.
line? Don't touch me. I'm kind of famous.
Yeah, and then I think it was Mbappe's security guard who was like, I'm in charge around here.
Yeah.
So I love it.
I would like "Don't Touch Me, I'm Kind of Famous" on a t-shirt. I think that'd be pretty hilarious, especially considering my day job. Spinners, meanwhile, yours I feel is one that you often have a gripe with.
Yep, consistency is key. The stewards, my word, sort your stuff out.
Are you going to do like a Carlos Sainz thing of like appoint them as your spinners until eventually they do something otherwise? Or I suppose that's kind of how spinners work, isn't it, really?
Pretty much, but I fear this may be a very long-term investment, much like Carlos Sainz was in that respect.
We'll see how that pans out. Meanwhile, for me, Monaco's road maintenance department, um, not something I anticipated seeing happen this weekend. I could imagine it happening at Madrid at the Madrid,
Or
where
Jeddah,
or Jeddah, or any number of circuits where it just sort of cobbled together last minute by a badly
Vegas.
organized workforce or slave labor, if we're talking Jeddah. Um, but Monaco, I can't. I never foresaw this happening there. I imagine that Anthony knows, ironically, the corner where it happened is spinning in his grave. But there we go. Um, Predictions. No one gets any points for
Didn't go
predictions.
well.
No, it did not a successful weekend. Did I even write them over onto the main document? I didn't, but no, we didn't get anything. Um, Meanwhile, fantasy F1 review. I've had a look at mine. I didn't do well here at all. For reasons.
Not for Monaco. You're still just about in it overall, but this did
Yeah,
not help you.
No. For Monaco, Pit Crew '04 wins this week with 197 points. Dershfall Team, 193 points, and Etty 13, 184 points. Blink 182 kilometers an hour, lovely title. P4, Malteser Racing, P8. One of my teams did all right. On the curbs,
That was your
P1.
top team.
Yeah, that was my top team. The Hasta Plan, P21, the worst of all options, P26. My podcast team, P27, Jaffa Cake Racing, P28. That's one of my other teams. And your podcast team, 29th with 0 points. Genuinely very impressive.
I have a slight gripe with how they do the point scoring. I was looking at the not for the zero, like fine, that happens, what have you. But Lawson finished fifth, and I think he only got 12 points. There just seems something off with how many points they're awarding for certain drivers because that's not something that happens often. You should be getting a lot more for that sort of thing. And I want to know how they choose that because Lewis coming second on double points, I think was only 54 points, which I feel like they are giving out less points overall generally at the moment. I don't know what's going on
Hang
there.
on,
Not helped by the fact that I couldn't log in prior to the weekend, so I was stuck with my choices.
let's go find someone. So you got, I'm looking at your podcast team that scored no points for this
Hmm.
weekend. So the reason why, let's take Pierre Gasly got 12. Obviously he finishes seventh, so he gets an appropriate 6 points. He qualifies ninth, so you get sprint race points for qualifying. So he gets 2 points for that. You get a point for every position you gain and a point for every overtake you make. So he gets a further 4 points there, which gives him his total of 12.
It will seem feel like this is going to be another sideshow where it goes into okay, so I understand the rules, but is there not a better way of doing this? Is the are the stewards and the FIA in charge of these point scoring mechanisms? Because this also feels different from what it was before. But there we go. It is what it is. I'm not winning this year. I know that much.
Lawson finishes fifth, gets 10 points for it. That's the standard scoring process. Qualifying position 10th, so he gets 1 point for that, sprint points. And because he's gained 5 places, though not necessarily made the overtakes for them, only gets 5 points because it was simply people ahead of him retired. He didn't make any on-track overtakes. That's the difference. So yeah,
This feels like such an unceremonious number for Pip.
yeah, it's kind of it's a strange one. Um, But there we could go. Overall, Dershfall team 1,560 points leads the championship. Sabonius Racing 1,461 points in second, and Etty 13 in third with 1,261 points. On Melancholy Grid, P4, Jaffa Cake Racing P5, Champagne Macarons 2, P10, and the worst of all possible options remains at the bottom, 29th.
Ironically, with Kimi Antonelli in the team,
Yeah, we ought to do something about
it's just
that.
everyone else cancels them out. So it's
Yeah.
we'll fix that next time round.
Surely we must have gotten rid of him by this point.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, we'll do something about that for next time. Speaking of next time, we'll be back in relatively short order with a preview of the Spanish Grand Prix. Or no, it's not the Spanish. No, this is the final iteration of this being the Spanish Grand Prix, and then it's the Madrid Grand Prix, and then the Madrid Grand Prix becomes the Spanish Grand Prix, and if Catalonia returns, it's the Catalan Grand Prix. Anyway, we'll be back
Call
to
it the European Grand Prix like we used to
yeah,
when
we
you
could
have two in the same country. It's not. This is the biggest gripe from this podcast episode. We have so many issues that we are having overcomplicated solutions for. Just make it simple. There we go. Not rocket science.
very true. Is that why we have the US Grand Prix at COTA? We have the Miami Grand Prix in Miami. We have the Las Vegas
The
Grand
Las
Prix in
Vegas
Las
Grand
Vegas.
Prix. You're not getting confused with that, are you?
No.
There we go. No, there
Anyway,
aren't any others.
yeah, no, there aren't because
Not
we only
anymore.
go to one round in Italy these days. Anyway, I miss the days when we used to have three Italian Grand Prix.
Is that what 1 year?
It was a heyday for people who love Italy, all right. Leave me alone. Um, Timo, in the meantime, where can people find you?
This week on the Cubs with Andrea Penasherry, on the Cubs IndyCar for St. Louis review, no spoilers, but it's a corker. And I have an article out on Charles Leclerc and the future of Ferrari over on Paddock Influence. That'll be on later in the week anyway, so go and check all of those out.
Lovely stuff. And if you want more from me, you can find me writing for Classic Car Weekly as well as on the Classic Car Weekly podcast. If you're listening to this early on Tuesday, I suppose, you can find me at London Concours this week. Otherwise, please don't find me because I'll be at home and that'd be very weird. You can also find me on the internet as at Jesse on Cars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening to this review of the Monaco Grand Prix. We'll be back back on Wednesday night, with this probably going live on Thursday morning, with a preview of the Spanish Grand Prix.